Welcome back to MedFluencers Unscripted. My name is Dr. Adam Goodkoff, co-founder and CEO of MedFluencers. I am joined by Jordan from our team.
Hey
And today
guys.
we have Doc Schmidt. So, Dr. Schmidt, thank you for joining us. Over 1 million followers across platforms, hundreds of thousands on each platform individually. You're a gastroenterologist and author as well, which I'm excited to get into. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to social media?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. But yeah, my name is Ben Schmidt. I'm a GI doctor based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And I've been an independent practicing GI doctor for a little over a year now. I finished my fellowship in June, 2 Junes ago at this point. But I started social media actually in the first year of my GI fellowship. So it's been almost exactly 4 years now since I started making social media content. So it's been quite a wild 4 years, but it was something that I sort of started on a whim in the sense that I was sort of like everybody else discovering TikTok and what it was in the height of the pandemic and how to use it and how people were using it. And that's kind of what inspired me. I had been making video content for a long time. I was kind of, in the YouTube generation, trying to be famous on YouTube when it came out originally. So I made a lot of kind of silly comedy skits and those sorts of things. But it was only during the pandemic that I started focusing on TikTok and focusing on medical content specifically, where I kind of found my niche. And it's been a wild ride, as you alluded to, now with over 1 million followers across multiple platforms. It's been really cool to see how much how much interest this can generate and how many opportunities it has granted me. It's been amazing.
You shared a lot of interesting components to that, but you've said a wild ride, and I love getting into that. I have two questions. I want to hear about the wild ride, but first, why take the time? I mean, we can both appreciate how bad residency is. I thankfully did not do a fellowship after residency, but I know, my fiance is in a fellowship now. It's a lot of work. Why jump on social? Why'd you do it?
It's probably the number one question that I get asked. And it's one of those things where looking back, I'm not sure how I did it, but I am definitely sure why I did it. It
I was
was
going to say, I need
because
your time management tips then.
Mhm. Exactly. I mean, the time management honestly seems remarkable even to me when I retell what I used to do from a content creation perspective. But in terms of why I did it, it definitely, as with all things, came out of just an enjoyment and a passion for making the videos. And it was really just a hobby in some ways. And then what kind of happens, as we all know who are affiliated with social media, is when you make content that people enjoy, that has an addicting component to it as well. So I kind of had two things fueling me. I really like making videos, and you can look back, even if you scroll back far enough on the Doc Schmidt TikTok page, there's some non-medical content at the very, very, very beginning, if you're willing to scroll for that long, because I just liked making videos. If, with my siblings, my friends in med school, we would make skits kind of making fun of the professors and those sorts of things. So that was something that I already had the passion for doing. But then I think what really tipped me over the edge is, selfishly, it was so cool to be able to reach as many people as I was reaching early on, and have people respond to the types of things that I thought were funny, or the things that I thought were meaningful or serious or scary or concerning about the medical field. And seeing the different types of people I could reach and the different types of impact that I was having is what kind of inspired me. And that led to me having this bizarre schedule where I would work as a GI fellow during the day. I would, do scopes, I would see consults, I would come home and I would make one or two TikToks, and I would just post them as soon as I made them. And I would keep that going. I think at one point I posted every day for 6 months. And you would think
Wow.
that with the
Wow.
beautiful time management skills that I have, I would be making a bunch at once and then, scheduling them. But most of the time I would get too excited about a video. I would film it and I would post it 10 minutes later. And so that was really, I think, a sign of the passion element of it, where I was just too excited to even sit on videos because I wanted to put them out there and see the response they would have.
I have to imagine you have a passion for like TV, film, comedy. How did the Doc Schmidt persona start?
Definitely. I am a huge TV and film guy, both in the sense of comedy, more like in the style of my videos a little bit, but also all genres, honestly. I mean, people have definitely compared certain videos I've made to like Scrubs style content,
Yeah.
and the fact that it's just kind of like silly skits, for sure. So I would say that was kind of an inspiration for me. Definitely, I think the kind of comedy styles of the shows that were big when I was like in high school, college, like The Office, 30 Rock, Parks and Rec, were definitely big. influences to me. It's interesting that there's a show, I honestly can't think of the name of it right now, but there's a show that's either being released in the next few weeks that's basically an office style hospital show that I'm very curious to see what
Oh,
it's
Oh
like on
wow.
NBC. So I'm curious to check that out, because that's kind of what I was kind of going for a lot with these kind of skits and multiple strange personalities in a lot of my videos. So I think that's what inspired me a little bit along the way. Arrested Development is another one. So a lot of kind of these niche
Yeah.
comedy shows, I think, inspired me. And then seeing all these medical shows like Scrubs and even House to some extent, I've made videos making fun of House and poking fun at, tropes that are repeated a lot in TV, Grey's Anatomy as well. So those have all been both inspirations in the sense of kind of honing my comedic voice, but also literally like content that I can make from those parodies and those sorts of things.
Well, you have the window behind you for the office setup where we're going to come into the out of the office and get your viewpoint on something. So I think you've got that set ready. I hope this doctor show lives up to the hype, because I was binge watching The Office back on the flight the other day, and that show will forever have a place in my heart.
or maybe you need to
True.
write your own show.
It's
Oh, that could be
definitely
fun.
it's definitely crossed my mind, but I don't know. I think the what's so nice about social media is that like this kind of level of control that you have where you can kind of curate your own page based off of the interests that you have at that time. So that's what I wonder. I'm often jealous at like Dr. Glockenflecken, for example, and how he has this kind of cast of characters that he creates. But I personally, I find that I don't have like I don't know if patience is the right word, but I try to create these characters. I'm like, oh, I got to be like Dr. Glockenflecken. I make these characters, but then in the next video, I'm like, I don't remember exactly how that guy talked or how that guy dressed. I'm just going to do a new character that kind of fits with this exact idea I have. So I don't have the consistency yet to do that, I think.
It's
Okay,
a dedication.
we
Yeah.
need to know how many wigs you have. I'm just like imagining a room in your house with mannequins and just
Mm-hmm.
wigs everywhere.
This is that room. I mean,
Wow.
there's a bucket. I will describe it as.
350 behind me here.
Yeah, right. I mean, they are all in a bucket right behind me. I don't have an easy way of lifting it up to show you, but I can assure you there's about 12 is the simple answer to that question.
I
There's a
thought we were going to get
few.
multiple during this interview now.
I mean, I'm sad you aren't wearing one today, honestly, but
We'll work up to that for sure.
Okay.
Some of
Okay.
them are
okay.
easier to put on than others. The kind of short haired ones I can throw on very quickly at a moment's notice. But yeah, those are the ones that you'll notice if you're really a scholar of my videos. The wigs have gotten shorter and shorter because I don't have the patience to put on certain wigs that I have. So there's certain ones that are in the back of the bucket that I just am unwilling to try out.
Well, speaking of dedication to the content, I'd love to dive back into the training arm of it for a second, because making content during training is tricky in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the relationships with your colleagues that go with that. But doing comedy content is harder, right? Because once we make a piece of content, we have a perception and an intention of what it's going to do, but everybody perceives things differently. So have you had a piece land poorly among colleagues or among folks in your health system? And how do you navigate those challenges? Because I always respect those who dedicate to the comedy side, because it does feel kind of higher risk.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's been a that's part of the wild ride, I guess, that I alluded to earlier, where there have definitely been challenges. I think I was lucky in that I didn't have like another application process. I wasn't in the midst of an application process when I started this. It was only a couple months into my fellowship. So I think that made things a little bit easier. And the fact that I had, gotten to know everybody before I started making content, so that they already had an impression of who I was as a person before seeing the online persona. So there were there have been no issues in the sense of response to people at work or people that I'm training with, those sorts of things. But there have certainly been videos that I regretted posting, or that I regretted how they were interpreted because of kind of jokes that I've made and people who saw those videos. But this is more, I'm talking on the scale of like, nurses maybe at other hospitals or those sorts of things.
Sure,
And I think
sure.
that's largely because they don't necessarily know me personally and they interpret it different ways. And I think a lot of my videos, especially early on, was poking fun at the interactions between nurses
Yeah.
and doctors and pharmacists and, respiratory therapists and everyone involved. And I think that there's definitely people who have grossly different experiences than I have. So they're kind of primed to interpret a joke one way when I'm meaning it in another. So there have been videos, for example, about nurses, just like I said, the interaction between a doctor and a nurse. And what I've learned in going through finishing fellowship and now being an attending is in private practice where I am now, the interactions between nurses and doctors are very different. So that's been very
Right.
interesting. And now I can almost look back and see how the videos that I've made before might even be have been kind of interpreted differently just based off of other people's interactions. But I've been lucky in that it hasn't affected me in a negative sense, in like the drama of, almost getting fired, or those sorts of
Yeah.
things. The kind of one funny story I have in that regard is, I obviously with any video that gets a lot of reach, you're going to have people that nitpick at it and take offense to things that aren't really a matter of perspective. They're just people being unreasonably nitpicky and just looking to almost be offended, I think, in certain points. And I actually was reported to my program director at one point for a video that I made. They kind of made a formal complaint to the chief medical officer of the hospital, and it worked its way down.
Oh, wow.
But the phrasing of the comment was a little bit unprofessional, borderline unhinged. So I think that's what protected me a little bit, is that the my program director saw it as more of just a gentle reminder of being careful, but not anything that needed to be penalized. So it's definitely something that's a legitimate risk, and that's why I think it is important for people who are going into social media to be cautious of the context. Like as I said at the beginning, like it's not something to be. You don't want to be, taking risks necessarily when you're in the middle of an application process, for example, because there are a lot of ways you can be exposed, and that can be negative in some cases.
Oh, I was there. I showed up to residency. I'd been on, social media for quite some time, and was on before I even started residency. So talk about an uphill battle. I mean, I walked in as the most hated individual, or what felt like the most hated individual at and we were a multi-site hospital. So everywhere I walked in, there was a room full of nurses that was like, this guy. Like, here comes the village idiot who's just so worried about social media and doesn't spend any time learning. And it probably took me a year and a half to repair those relationships with a lot of the nurses and kind of win over. I mean, I think a lot of my colleagues, would agree. Like, I would kind of try and go above and beyond early on, because, and not that they wouldn't, but I was always trying to push, how could I help? How could I do more? How could I see more patients? Because it was like everybody had this preconceived notion that, like, oh, this is the guy that does social media. Like, here we go. And I had similar experiences to you. We won't get into my details, but they also went up to the top of the hospital, and they were very scary on the way down. So thankful to have made it out alive. But it can be tricky.
Well, because that's what I'm always curious about, because I feel like when you started, the way HCPs are on social media now is probably not when you started. So what was the reaction from your peers? Was it similar to Adam? Like, they're kind of dogging on you? What is that? Did they just don't get it?
I think to some degree, but honestly, again, I had the luxury of growing with the same group of people, and in GI, I guess ER is similar, but GI, you're working with the same group of nurses and staff very consistently, like in the GI lab itself, for example. So what was kind of a fun element of it for me is people were kind of poking fun at me initially, more as that I was trying to do it, because it's not like I was necessarily advertising it, but as I slowly grew, there would be more and more people that would happen to see a video that I had made. Sometimes I think TikTok, like if you have someone's number, it's more likely to show up on their page, for example. So then, as I met more residents, as I added the numbers of nurses when I'm having to call them, when I'm on call to need, help with the scope and that kind of thing, they started seeing it more and more, but it almost became like a group effort of like how big this can get. So they got excited with me as I grew. Cause when I started, people are finding out about this when I have 1,000 followers, and then it's slowly growing. Like, hey, I have 10,000 now. And they're kind of supporting me. I had one co-fellow who was a very, larger than life, gregarious guy. And he would, when we would like go to the cafeteria, he would stop random people and be like, hey, this guy, he's on TikTok, you should look him up. So, people trying to, for better or for worse, trying to get the word out, I guess.
I was going to say that always makes me, I appreciate the gesture, but I always want to like crawl under my skin. I'm like, no, don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it.
Exactly.
Like if they discover it organically, that's fine. But then you got to be like, no, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, I just make these videos, and then inevitably they open and they go, oh my God, it is a big deal. Like, that's a lot of people. So I always find that an awkward encounter.
Yeah. There's nothing you can really say. You either come off as like weird or arrogant. I feel like there's no way you come off as cool when you're like, yeah, I do TikTok and I have a lot of followers. There's no real way to, unless it's an organic discovery, there's no right way to do it.
Yeah. Now, Jordan and I were talking earlier about specialties and about why people choose things. And, GI's got some downsides, mainly the location where you're performing services. So would love to understand what drove you into GI. And I was explaining the tactile component of operating a scope and the finesse and skill set that comes with that is probably very appealing in being really good at scoping. And there's a medical management component. These patients get really sick, but I'd love to hear from your lens, like why, of all the things you can do in internal medicine, what made GI feel right?
Yeah, it's something I get asked a lot, and you know, patients jokingly, or maybe not jokingly, ask me right before a colonoscopy a lot, like, "Why are you doing this? Why did you pick this,
Yeah.
doctor?" So, I have a lot of versions of this answer in the sense of like the context and the length of time,
Yeah.
but the general answer that I give a lot is that GI has even though it's a specialty, it has a wide diversity of disease, but also kind of experiences. And I think that's what's really important about any specialty, to keep things interesting and keep things exciting. So in a literal sense, even though it's a specialty, it still has a lot of disease and a lot of organs within it. So that you can have diseases of the pancreas, of the liver, of the intestines, of course, and the esophagus and the stomach, the bile ducts. So you have so many different organ systems within this organ system, I guess, or different organs within this organ system. So even in a half day of clinic, I might see 5 different organs that are diseased. So that's very appealing. And then the balance again of the types of things that I'm doing in my day to day, which is, it's not monotonous. I'm not just in the clinic all day, for example, seeing patients. I will have a half day of clinic and then I go to do procedures. And these procedures are very quick, very simple procedures, which is something that appealed to me in that they can get people answers and get people results and help people very quickly. You know, the longest procedure I've ever done probably took an hour, and that was very, very unusual. Usually we're talking 10 to 30 minutes for these procedures.
Sure. Yeah.
And then there's also a mix of urgent cases as well as chronic cases, kind of as you alluded to, Adam, where you might have a Crohn's patient where you're taking care of them for years and years and years. You're having to change their medicines. You're having to scope them to see if these medicines are working. But then you might have someone who comes in with a bleeding ulcer and you do a procedure for them to fix that bleeding ulcer and you never see them again. So there's this interesting mix. And I think that's important in medicine, especially in this day and age where burnout is so prominent, where you avoid the monotony. And I think that's what really appealed to me about a GI from the get-go.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question to that. If you were in medicine, what do you think you would be doing?
If I wasn't in medicine, what would I be doing? I mean, I would like to be in the film industry in some capacity. I think would be
I'd
my
be in
dream
the office.
job.
I already told you.
I mean, yeah, maybe I would be Jim's
writing your
understudy on The
TV
Office.
series.
Would be my dream job. But no, I think I've always joked that I love trailers, like movie trailers. So I would love, I don't know if it's even a job, but to make movie trailers would probably be my true dream job. But a more realistic one would maybe try being a director or a screenwriter of, you know, I'll say smaller films, not necessarily in Hollywood, just to be a little bit more realistic. But that would be my ultimate goal, is to be in Hollywood, probably.
Living out your YouTube fantasy. I mean, you could start that. It could be like a faceless, nameless channel and kind of just work your way up into the indie film festival. I'll see it. What is it, Cannes next year?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would be fun. I'd be down for sure.
What genre would it stay? Comedy?
I mean, I think when I would make videos, as I said, I've been doing this since probably, I don't know, 8th or 9th grade, maybe. And I would often do kind of like sci-fi comedy, I would say is a common genre, because I like doing special effects, like making twins or clones where 2 of the same person talking to each other, or teleporting, or those sorts of things. So kind of a quirky sci-fi comedy, you know, filling that niche maybe.
I know. I used to do that in middle school too, like make iMovies, and I just would love to find those now.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, if anyone's curious, if you look up Spies of London on YouTube, you can find all of the videos. Spies is spelled with a Y, because literally that's how I thought it was spelled when I created this channel, when I was like
be
far too old
who you reveal that to. It's not too late for us to bleep that out, because if you open this to the worlds, you're
I
going
feel
to
like
become
that
a
was
YouTube
a
star now.
MedFluencers exclusive. You heard it here first.
Yes, it's a MedFluencers. Yeah, I mean, see, secretly I'm saying this so Steven Spielberg, who's obviously listening, watches these videos, sees the talent that I have, and you guys will see me in Hollywood at Cannes next year.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm glad you know our listener base, because that is spot on for our demographic.
Perfect.
I have to ask, and I think to bring it back on social for a second, one of the things that is really challenging for creators is keeping it fresh and exciting. And you talked about the diversity in medicine and the way that keeps you engaged in GI. How do you leverage diversity in the social content? Is it the platforms? Is it the type of content? And where are you in your head? Where are you taking this next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for me, that's part of the appeal of social media, is that I don't have to pigeonhole myself. I mean, obviously the age-old advice in social media is to find a niche, but my
Yeah.
niche at least is very broad. So just being medical, I can do a lot of stuff within that. I can make skits that are even within making skits. I can have a lot of different angles to that. I mean, I have kind of screwball skits that I joke are just for me, where like, you know, they don't have broad mass appeal. They're just kind of silly. But then I have skits that if you really watch them and really think about them, they're actually pretty poignant and pretty meaningful, where I'm trying to make a point about problems with the healthcare system or how health insurance works or those sorts of things. But then if I have a topic where I just want to, you know, talk and tell people something I experienced or something I believe in, I can just literally make a video like this where I'm talking to the camera. Lately, I've been doing a lot more of like misinformation, exposing scams with TikTok Shop. That's become a much more prominent
Isn't that
aspect
wild?
of my content, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
right now, that's been a big part of what I've been doing. In terms of where I want to go from here, I don't know that I have a great answer for that. And I think that's partly just because my life has been crazy recently with just finishing fellowship. I have a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old daughter now. So I've been a lot more divided. So that's what's kind of nice, is I can just step
Yeah.
back from social media. Now I post, you know, once a week as opposed to once or twice a day. So
Yeah.
I have that flexibility to do things that are different. But I think I love collaborating with other creators. So I kind of like the idea of creating some sort of long-term collaboration. I'm working with a
Yeah.
company called Ars Longa Media, where we're the ultimate goal. One of our kind of big long-term goals is to almost create like a Saturday Night Live, but for medical content, where we could have, you know,
Oh,
skits and different creators contributing, almost like they have Gomer Blog, for example, as
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
Onion like medical newspaper, but kind of turning that to the screen. So I think that's a long-term goal. That's what we're working on. But right now, I'm just kind of content to just keep responding to what inspires me.
Yeah.
that's awesome.
There's like it'll never happen, but like, do you remember Drunk History?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
You could never do it with doctors, but like that to me would be like the creme de la creme of like TV show. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I was going to host a show, it would be like the podcast, but so much funnier. And I think, you know, you wouldn't approve from the liver perspective, probably not healthy, but it was
Right.
just such a funny show.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that you would get, but it's also like the stuff you would get, you could never air. Like it would have to be
Right.
like a private show. You have to like log in with your NPI to watch or
Yeah.
something.
Exactly. It's
But
a different audience for
Yeah.
sure.
so
And
on diversifying your content as well, you're an author, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
come to that because number one, how did you get there, and then how has that been? It's very different than filming a video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
it
a
was a really
children's
yeah,
book.
and it was a
Yeah.
children's book too, which
Yeah,
was a huge departure. Obviously, I mean the
sure.
story is honestly simpler than you might think. I made a video that essentially was the same plot of the book. So the whole kind of genesis of the whole story within the book is that I always thought it was kind of funny how a lot of medical terms sound like locations or characters from fantasy novels, like something out of Lord of the Rings, like the islets of Langerhans
Yeah,
is something
yeah,
in the pancreas, but you know that
yeah.
sounds like some
Yeah. To
remote
me.
location and out of
Yeah.
Tolkien.
Jordan's like, I go on
So
vacation there. Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah. Sounds
exactly. It
great.
sounds lovely, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I kind of made this big list of terms like that, and then I made it as a story that a father was reading to his son, and the idea was that the son was starting med school the next day or soon, and the father was a doctor, and the idea was he was kind of putting all these medical terms in as like inside jokes for the son who didn't get them because he wasn't in medical school yet. And I got a lot of comments on that video of people saying I would read this book. So that was kind of what inspired me. So I commented, I was like, how many people would be interested in this book if I made it? And I got a lot of people responding to that. So I thought about it and I kind of changed the script of the video that I had written to kind of be in more of a book form. And then obviously
Hmm.
the big hurdle from there was finding someone to illustrate it, because I thought it should be more like a children's style book, because that was the whole
Right.
idea behind the video in the first place. So I found an awesome illustrator who goes by the name Elio Fanta. She's Italian. She actually has a PhD in biology,
Oh
but
wow.
Wow.
she quit her job because she was burnt out and wanted to pursue illustrating full time. So
Wow.
it was really the perfect person that I could have found. There was a slight language barrier between Italian and English. I mean, obviously I don't speak Italian. She's the one doing all the heavy lifting
Yeah.
there and
Yeah.
understanding my very confusing English that I'm
Right.
making her interpret into these weird drawings of
Yeah.
prions and mad cow disease. But
But at
yeah,
least she understood them. Like the end target, she's like, I totally know what you're talking about. Like an average illustrator would be like, I don't know what a
Mhm.
prion is, you know?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because I had so many people that I pitched it to, and they just could not. Even people that were from the U.S. who English was
Yeah.
their primary language. This is obviously, it's still a different language even from English, what I'm talking about. So
Right.
there was a lot of people who it did not translate well. And I had a drawing, I just described it to her, and then she drew it, and I was like, yeah, that's perfect. Let's do this. So it took a long time for sure, because I was still a fellow at the time. So it was a lot of back and forth with her, and tweaking these drawings, but she was incredible. I mean, really the success and the enjoyment people get out of the book is I think much more owed to her and her illustrations, because they're just incredible. But it was a lot of fun, and it was just very interesting. And I was able to publish it independently with the help of Amazon. Amazon has a great platform for doing that. It's a little bit more challenging with illustrated books, so I had a lot of learning of how to lay out a book and those sorts
Sure.
of things. But it
Yeah.
was really overall a great process, and it's been a lot of fun.
Wow. Okay, so on all things crazy and complex, do you have a crazy story as a GI doctor that you can tell us, obviously, that just comes to mind? And
I would say, I want to make sure you didn't cut off at the end. Just any crazy story, or was there a qualifier?
anything that
And
comes to mind.
I mean, the one that comes to mind that I tell people a lot is I was doing a procedure called a paracentesis on a patient. A paracentesis is when you drain abdominal fluid out of the belly of a patient that has cirrhosis, end stage liver disease. And this fluid can build up, and it needs to be drained to be tested for infection. And it can cause a lot of discomfort. And this particular patient, he had never had this procedure done. He had a new diagnosis, and we were doing it for the first time. And one of the unique things about this procedure is that the procedure itself, like doing the actual technical element of it, doesn't take very long. But then the long part of the procedure is you have to wait for this fluid to drain out of their belly. And there can be a large amount of fluid sometimes. I'm talking 5 liters, 10 liters in extreme
Wow.
cases. So huge amounts of fluid. And you can use a vacuum type device to increase the rate of flow, but there's only so much you can do. So it takes a long time is what I'm getting at. So you have a lot of downtime and just standing in this room awkwardly with a person while you're draining fluid out of their belly. So this guy, I was draining fluid out of his belly, and we're just, hanging out as you do in the hospital, draining abdominal fluid.
And are you just
And
making small
he,
talk during it?
yeah,
Like, what does that look like?
well, yeah, it's funny. I have, you have a lot of weird conversations with people,
Okay.
especially when at least when they're new to the procedure. You have something obvious to talk about, is like explaining what's going on and explaining the process, which is what I was doing with this guy. But he was looking at this fluid, and he was like just staring at it and just kind of shaking his head, which is a reasonable reaction. It's kind of crazy that much fluid can accumulate. But he looks at it and he goes, "Man, that looks a lot like beer." And I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it does. I mean, it does look like beer. I would say urine is the word I would use
Yeah.
typically
Yeah.
to describe it. It's kind of a cloudy yellowish fluid, but some beers look like that." So I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "I feel like you could just bottle that up and it would just look like it was beer." And I was like, "I suppose you could." And he will not let this go.
Yeah.
And he keeps going. Then he starts like essentially fantasizing about drinking it. He's like, "Do you think it would taste good drinking that?"
Oh,
And I was like, "No, I
No,
can tell
no.
you for sure it would not. It would taste
did
Yeah.
like salt and weird protein."
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
did this
Um,
go into a conversation maybe about his drinking intake? Did you
Yeah.
get a
Right.
pulse check
well,
on that?
yeah, I mean, well, and then ironically, as is sometimes the case, that was the etiology of his liver
Yeah.
disease, was alcohol. So
Oh,
that added a layer to it. But yeah, I mean, basically, he was creating this whole scenario of like creating a CITES beer that he would market to a very specific audience, and I was just having to
oh.
like more and more sternly convince him not to
That's
do that throughout
that's when
this
you're like, where's
hour.
the resident? Let me have the resident standing here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, because usually this would not be something that a fellow would be doing. Usually the
Right.
resident would be, but
Right.
it was a very unusual day, and like the resident was doing something else. So that's what added even more to it. So when the resident finally did come back, I was like, "Yeah, why don't you sit and chat with this guy for a little bit? He's got something to tell you about."
There you go.
Happen.
He's got something to
Exactly.
sell you on. This could be the investment of your career.
Right.
That
Exactly.
that is too funny. Now, this is not. We typically don't go into like medical stuff, so you can sidestep this question. But I'm just curious, from your lens, if you have any high level thoughts or reactions on weight loss medications, injectable weight loss, because I think, and this is not an on label discussion. This is nothing like pharma based, just conversationally. I think a lot of folks see a lot of great success, and a lot of folks in the healthcare world see a lot of, whether it's anecdotal or evidence-based, side effects that are pretty significant.
Mhm.
Pancreas things, GI things in particular. Do you
Definitely.
want to touch on
Sure.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, again, as you alluded to, I'm definitely biased in this discussion because of the line of work I'm in. I'm certainly not prescribing these medications, but I see a ton of people on them, and I see a lot of people where my best theory is that their symptoms that they're seeing me for, nausea, constipation, abdominal pain, are directly related to taking these type of injectable weight loss medicines. Because while they are effective, part of the reason that they're effective is that they so profoundly slow down gastric emptying that they make you not want to eat, which for a lot of people
Right.
works really well. And I've
Right.
talked anecdotally to a lot of people who that's been the case for. But the problem is there are some people that they work too well for. So they cause a lot of nausea. They cause a lot of, obviously, early satiety or feeling full early
Mm-hmm.
is intentional, but with that comes really bad heartburn as well. Because if your stomach is always half full, you could just think of how much worse your heartburn is when you're 10 minutes after a meal. Imagine being like that half of your day.
Ugh.
So it just
Yeah.
really increases that risk. And constipation, similarly, it just kind of slows down your whole gut. So I see a lot of people with these negative effects. Now, I'm not saying because of that I would never take one. I think that I definitely would say I would never do it just for fun, and I would never do it without really close supervision from your doctor and weighing all the
Yeah.
options and making sure that's the right option for you. But I think it's really important not to just to, even though it's easy in the sense that it's like an injection you just do once a week or every other week. It's not necessarily, or it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy because a lot comes with it that can make you feel bad. And I've seen, again, I'm not trying to scare people away from these medicines necessarily, but I've seen people who, even after they've stopped the medicine, they can have several weeks or even a couple months of these persistent GI issues before they go away. So I think it's something that's important to not take lightly. Along those lines,
Yeah.
another angle that I have on this is in doing procedures, I'll see the effects it can have. For example, we've actually had to change how we do our procedure guidelines in terms of preparing people. It used to be the only medicine that we worried about that you were taking was a blood thinner, because if
Mm-hmm.
you're on a blood thinner and we're doing a colonoscopy for you or an upper endoscopy where we might be biopsying, we might be removing polyps, we obviously don't want you on a blood thinner. But these medicines, these injectable weight loss medicines, have added a complication where we have to tell people to hold those medicines, because we've found that if you take that medicine and you fast for the typical amount that we require before a procedure, which is usually 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, we'll be doing an EGD where, because I'm in a unique position where when I'm doing a procedure, half the time I'm looking in your stomach and I'll see people whose stomach is half full of food
Mm-hmm.
12
Wow.
hours after they ate last.
Wow.
And in addition to that being obviously unpleasant to look at, which is not my main concern, the real risk of that is that if you throw up
Right.
and that food comes up your esophagus, it could go down into your lungs while you're still asleep, and it could kill you. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
now we have to have people hold these medicines for 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, depending on the indication and the dose. So it just
Wow.
tells you how well these medicines work and how kind of unintended
Wow.
consequences they can have.
Yeah, that, by the way, that was a fantastic answer. Very, very
Thank
well
you.
balanced. So very nice job. Yeah, I
Appreciate
think
it.
it's I think it's a super interesting topic. I have, obviously I get to walk both sides of the line, like living somewhat in the pharma world and somewhat in the medicine world, and all around both. And I hear people, again, I love that you used anecdotally, but anecdotally kind of drawing these connections to other like fast fad medicines in the past and concerns around that. And I think, there is good data on these medications with the right patients and the right indication. And, again, close monitoring, you've kind of hit all the points, but it's been interesting to watch, because I think there are a lot, right? We see, and this is the dangerous part of social media. And you touched on it with like the TikTok shop, and some of the things I've seen on there are just ridiculous. I don't know how that's legal for them to be doing that, but
Agreed.
the celebrities are going to physicians or some form of a healthcare practitioner who is giving them this medication, and they are not necessarily someone who needs to be losing a ton of weight. And I
Mhm.
think that's where, again, we get into a tough discussion. And it's just I thought in the GI space in particular, you may see a lot of those patients that come in, because I hear it all the time in the ER. They're
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm here for abdominal pain. I'm like, start any new meds? And all of a sudden, oh yeah, oh
Yep.
okay, I see what's happening. So
Exactly.
yeah. Before we wrap up, we always like to kind of give our guests a chance to touch on anything that you might want to share, something you're working on, a topic you're passionate about. We'll turn the floor over to you. And if there's nothing, that's perfectly
That's
fine
fine.
too, because we've covered a tremendous amount of really interesting stuff today. But I'll open it up if you've got anything you want to share.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I mean, definitely what I'm working on now is just continuing to post content to all of my platforms across social media on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I think right now I'm trying to change my content a little bit as being an attending physician and changing how that looks. So I'm working on a series right now where it's sort of a POV series, but it's a serious one where I just kind of act like I've just diagnosed you with a series of different GI diseases. Like I just diagnosed you with celiac disease or hemorrhoids, very common things people have heard of. So just maybe be on the lookout for that. If that's something that is of interest for you, I'm going to start with 5 videos, see how people like those and try to expand from there. So in the next few weeks in the month of November, December is when I'm planning on putting those out. If that doesn't work time wise for the release of this podcast, then just be looking out for a lot of fun videos with kind of dispelling misinformation, me just angrily yelling at the camera, trying to get these videos deleted off of TikTok, probably unsuccessfully. And we'll go from there.
Can we actually? I hate to pull back in. We'll do really fast
I know I
sidebar
had
though.
something too.
Yeah, I'm sorry that it just the TikTok shop thing. Like, what is the most egregious product you've seen there? Because the ads are like people are masquerading as some healthcare expert, and they're like, "You must take this
I know.
supplement
I think
right
I could be
now."
on there with none of my
Oh,
medical
definitely. I
degrees.
mean, there's so many. Well, it's funny that you say that because literally, like while I was getting all my stuff together to record this, of course, I'm like addicted to TikTok. So I'm just like casually flipping through TikTok while getting my stuff together. And this video came up and it's this guy who's in scrubs, ostensibly a tech or a
Mhm.
nurse is the vibe he's giving off at least. And he's like, I just got fired from my job because I was telling a patient to try this for his sinus infections. And it was like something that helps open up your sinuses that you just like breathe in. A boom boom stick, I believe. Not
Oh,
sponsored
I've
is
seen
what it's
those.
called.
Yeah, I've
Um,
seen those.
but what was funny about it was I was curious. I was like, who is this guy? Like it didn't seem true, like the story he
Yeah,
was telling. So I went to his page and he literally, and I'm going to make a video on this. So you can, if when you're
yeah.
listening to this, go find it on my page because it's going to be a funny video, I think. He has 4 videos with the exact same script for different health products and subbing in different things he got fired from. Like, I just got fired at my job from the hospital for recommending this. I just got fired from my job in the ICU for recommending this. I just got fired from my job at the dentist for recommending this. And they're all different products. And he literally, almost word for word, says the exact same series of things like, but I'm going to tell you because you're going to benefit from it, even though my boss got mad at me and fired me. So that's not a specific product. Well, I guess one of them is a specific product I said, but it's very
Yeah.
interesting, these sales tactics. And that's what I actually been trying to get into with my videos is show you how they are trying to trick you, because I think that's actually the valuable thing. Obviously, any one given video or any one given product, rather, perhaps it could help you. Who am I to say? I haven't done, part of the problem is these things haven't been tested. So I
You
can't
haven't
really tell you
sampled the
it's not
boom
going to
boom
work.
stick.
Exactly.
I've never heard of that, but
No,
that's
we're not promoting that at all. That
No.
is just I'm just
Yes.
making fun of it. Yeah,
ugh.
but we don't need
Exactly.
to hear of it. But yes, I agree wholeheartedly. It is wild, and frankly, like regulatory bodies are listening to these type of conversations on social and seeing this, and it is
Mhm.
100% inappropriate to be presenting yourself as a credible, verified, healthcare
Mhm.
professional and promoting something that has no medical evidence. So it's a concerning behavior, and I think the work you're doing is phenomenal to combat those
Thank
videos
you.
because TikTok clearly isn't taking them down.
Yeah, and to also educate your viewers to like be watching this stuff through a critical lens and just not believing
Mhm.
everything they see or read.
Yeah, it's so easy to be tricked. That's the problem, unless you know the signs or how to kind of delve a little deeper.
Jordan, I don't want to rob you. Did you have anything else? Because
Well, I had a few that because it's been
a
so much
few.
fun to
All
chat.
right,
We could chat with you all
Sure.
day. Okay, well,
we
so
could.
first it stuck out to me when you said you were kind of already planning for November and December. So you really
Mhm.
will plan your content out far in advance. And then what do you do if you're going through a creative rut? Like how do you work through that? Because I mean, sometimes it's hard to really plan out that far in advance.
It can be. I mean, one of the negatives is just it's not always necessarily topical content that I'm planning out that far.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, what I'll often do is I'll plan kind of like a bare bones content because my goal is to post once a week. So I'll batch. I will batch now that I have a lot more going on in my life and I don't have as
Mm-hmm.
much free time. So I'll make 5 videos in an afternoon and then schedule them 1 week out. And then when something topical comes up, like for instance, I'm planning to make a video of a Halloween themed video of like the scariest GI diseases, for example. that video I didn't make months ago. I'm going to make that in the next week and just post it right after I finish making it. But yeah, I do schedule videos out. Right now I'm in the end of my batch, so I don't have any actually videos that are currently scheduled, but all these point of view disease videos that I was alluding to are getting ready to be finished, and those are going to be scheduled out. So I try to get some elements planned out ahead just for my own sanity and just to have some more flexibility. But that's what's kind of nice about social media is then I can have these videos where I can then, nothing says I can only post once a week. So I'll throw in a Halloween video as my second video of that week. So I can add a little bit of, bonus content, for lack of a better phrase.
And now what would you say to people who are really just starting out on social media? Like, do you feel like that consistent posting is how they're going to grow their following, or what are your tips for people in that position?
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for asking that. That's one of my favorite things to talk about is how to get started, because I think I got very lucky. I didn't know what I was doing, but I think unintentionally I found a good strategy in starting social media. And I think the key is not necessarily scheduling the content, but the consistency of posting is very, 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 very important. So like I alluded to, I had probably a 6-month stretch where I posted every day. And that is without a doubt the reason that I went viral. Not necessarily, obviously people like the content, but you can have good content. If you're posting it randomly every few months, it's not going to get picked up in the same way as if you're I think of myself as the epitome of the right place, right time with YouTube Shorts, because YouTube Shorts came into existence after I had been making TikToks for maybe 6 months. And therefore I had 6 months of content to start posting every single day on YouTube Shorts, everything I just posted to TikTok. And that's why my YouTube Shorts my YouTube channel grew so substantially. So what I'm getting at is if you're starting a YouTube channel, I would not come up with a cool video and then post it the second you've come up with it. I would come up with a cool video and then work on other videos that are like that you are excited about, that make you excited to be making them. That's an area you're passionate about, and have an arsenal of at least 10 videos ready to post. And whatever interval you think you're going to be able to keep up, schedule them at that interval. If you think you can keep up every day, obviously that would be, there's some TikTokers out there that literally make 5 TikToks a day. Obviously that's not realistic for a medical influencer, but if you're particularly passionate and have the right specialty, you could do every day. And so you could schedule those 10 days in a row and see how they do, and then start making them along the way so you can keep that up. So that's kind of what I unintentionally was doing, just because I was excited about it in a place. I think it's because of COVID probably that I didn't have any social obligations I was turning down necessarily. I after I got home from work, that was all I had to worry about, was making TikToks.
That's great advice.
I love that. And that's low stress. Of the badness during that time, I felt the same way. It was like, there's nothing else to do, so just make videos.
Right. It's a blessing in disguise in that sense.
Yeah.
Silver lining.
Well, thank you, Dr. Schmidt, for joining us here on MedFluencers Unscripted. This was great to get to kind of dive into some of the fun elements. We made it serious. We got your background. I think we got a lot. And remind our viewers and listeners, please, where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they should go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got my biggest 3 platforms are TikTok, where my handle is simply Doc Schmidt, Instagram, where I'm Doc Schmidt IG, and YouTube, where I'm Doc_Schmidt, I believe. And then I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, and you can find me at docschmidt.org as well if you want.
We can find you everywhere. I love it. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Dr. Schmidt, for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Thanks for having me.